This is the second installment of a chilling true crime tale we began unraveling in our last video. It explores a case within the murky depths of family dynamics where love and desperation collide. A sinister plot unfolds, one that transcends the realms of divorce and custody battles. Today's case at hand is not a typical saga of a marriage gone bad, but rather a harrowing narrative of evil plans resorting to the unthinkable in a quest for ultimate control. Join us as we unravel the second layer of this tragic case and dive into the depths of the human mind and the chilling motivations that drive individuals to commit unthinkable acts in the name of control and possession. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 7. It's actually 6.5 because today is part 2 of a case we began to explore last week here on the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimberlea, and I am here with my co-host, my boyfriend, Jonathan.
Hi. If you like our content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on when we post.
We try to post on Mondays, but lately, it's been taking a little extra time to get things together, so you don't want to miss out. So if you stumbled upon part 2 today, we'd highly recommend that you stop and you go back and watch part 1. I'll put it in the cards and I will put it below conveniently, a link, so you can just click it ASAP. We firmly stress that you do not watch this episode without knowing the entire backstory of the lives of the people that we're going to be diving deeper in today. And one caveat before I begin, because we got a lot of comments in the last episode, and you can never win. We know that. Some said we catered toward Wendi too much. Others said we were missing the red flags with Dan's issues. And we are doing our best to provide a well-rounded view of this case. We actually don't have personal opinions. We're not a jury, but the information that we gather is from testimony under oath, police interrogations, legal documents, and books on this topic from Dan's mother, Wendi herself, and a lawyer named Stephen Epstein, who is very involved in the understanding of the facts of this case. I'm a victim advocate first and foremost, but I'm also going to try to tell you the whole story as much as we can. And Wendi and Dan brought out the worst in each other, period. Divorces do that on their own. These people are probably both amazing and good parents, both capable of giving their boys a good life. And people have attested to that. But you can't be everything to everyone. And everyone presents themselves differently depending on who they're interacting with. We all have our stage faces, our work personalities, who we are when we're in a relationship, and who we are when we don't like someone. It doesn't mean that's a person's personality or exact character, but circumstantially, both Wendi and Dan were not very nice to one another, both of them. And this comes from testimony and interviews with their mutual friends and family members who witnessed their divorce. And that's when things got really ugly, and that's what we are focusing on. So don't forget, they're also both attorneys, and they're going through a legal process together. So they're looking at it through the lens of not just parents, but attorneys who are taught to win. So keep that in mind. Lawyers by nature are competitive, and both Wendi and Dan were overachievers. It started to become more about their legal reputations, especially in their community as attorneys who could win their side of the divorce case rather than just compromising and ending it.
If you've already caught up, then you know in part 1, we left you with a disturbing 911 call from a man named James Geiger. He was the next door neighbor to Dan Markel, a prominent law school professor at Florida State University College of Law in Tallahassee, Florida. On the morning of July 18th, 2014, Dan Markel had just finished dropping off his 2 young sons, Ben and Lincoln, at Creative Preschool. He went to take a fitness class at the gym and then pulled into his garage of his Tallahassee home that he once shared with his ex-wife, Wendi Adelson. He was on the phone with a man named Stuart Schlazer at the time as he idled in his driveway with his key still in the ignition of his 2008 black Honda Accord. He informed Stuart that he needed to pause their conversation because someone he didn't recognize was approaching his car. Stuart heard a loud noise and then heavy breathing. He asked Dan if he was okay, but he didn't get a response. All he could hear was an open line. Someone had shot Dan.
Today's episode may begin with someone attempting to end Dan Markel's life, but the motive was 7 years in the making. If you watch my main true crime channel here on YouTube, You would know that I love timelines, so in this video, we will make sure to account for all of Dan's time, as well as everyone else involved in this case to paint a very clear picture of exactly what was going on by including video and audio of testimony from witnesses, interviews with police, CCTV footage, trial coverage, and more to fill in the blanks. This will help you see just how calculated this evil plan really was and everyone involved. And then you can make your own personal opinion at the end when everything is revealed. Dan Markel had been battling his ex-wife Wendi for continued control over how to raise their two sons, 5-year-old Ben and 3.5-year-old Lincoln. That is where the divorce proceedings that began in the fall of 2012 had led by the summer of 2014. The divorce was finalized a year earlier in the summer of 2013. But after they signed the settlement agreement, there was constant back and forth about money, how to raise the boys, and neither of them agreed with one another. Just a few days before Dan was shot, he had learned that his ex-wife had filled out an application for their oldest son, Ben, to begin a kindergarten program at the School of Arts and Sciences without consulting Dan first. And he was not happy about this.
He wanted his children to be immersed in the Jewish religion, and he was concerned about Wendi applying for Ben to attend a non-denominational school. We told you that Dan was speaking with a man named Stuart that morning. Well, a mutual friend named Jake had spoke with Dan the past few days about his concerns with the school that Wendi was interested in, and Jake told Dan he was friends with a man named Stuart who worked at the school and encouraged Dan to speak with Stuart about the program to get some behind-the-scenes knowledge and ease his concerns. So Dan agreed and Jake gave Stuart Dan's number. That morning at 9:56 a.m., while Dan was still at the gym, Stuart texted him saying, "Hi Dan, I'm Jake's friend who works at SAS. Please call me anytime. I'd love to answer your questions." When Dan was done working out, he walked to his car and got inside at 10:34 a.m. 2 minutes later, at 10:36 a.m., he texted Stuart saying, "Thanks, what's your name? I'll try you shortly." Stuart texted back right away within the same minute, giving his name.
Now, Dan had a habit of speaking with his mother, Ruth, whenever he was driving home from different destinations. He would end their calls when he pulled into his garage. He'd say the same thing every time to alert his mother that the call was about to end. He'd say, "I'm almost there," letting her know he was going to wrap up their call. Not much was different on the morning of July 18th. As Dan pulled out of the parking space at the gym, he dialed Ruth, and they began talking as he exited the parking lot and proceeded towards his house on Trescott Drive, which is only about a 10-minute drive away. At the time, his mother, who lived out in Toronto, Canada, was on a trip in Montreal visiting her uncle Laser for his 97th birthday. He was the closest thing Ruth had to a father growing up because her own dad died suddenly from a heart attack when she was only 9 years old. And Dan was very close to Laser as well and wanted to wish him a happy birthday. So he called that morning and Ruth put him on the phone to relay his birthday wishes. Then Laser passed the phone back to Ruth, and that's when she noticed Dan's tone had changed. He was angry with Wendi, which wasn't unusual. Ruth knew how contentious their divorce had been and the constant struggles her son was facing as he tried his best to get as much time as he could with his boys and raise them the way he thought was best. Dan began telling Ruth about a call that he was about to have with a teacher named Stuart from SAS. Instead of speaking with her until he got to his driveway as usual, he cut their conversation short, telling Ruth he had to make this call and he'd talk to her later. Ruth had a lot of her own going on that day, and she knew she'd catch up with Dan at some point during the evening, so she let him go, not knowing that that was the last time she would ever speak to her son.
At 10:48 a.m., as Dan was getting closer to his house, he made that call to Stuart, who can tell that Dan was driving and probably had the phone on speaker because he could hear the sounds of the road, and a couple minutes into the call, Dan pulled into his driveway. Stuart could tell that the car had stopped because he no longer heard the rumbling of the road and other outside noises. At that moment, Dan said to Stuart, "Hold on a second, there's someone in my driveway that's unfamiliar to me." Stuart said, "Sure, no problem." And he just waited patiently for Dan to come back on the line. But that didn't happen. Instead, Stuart took note of 3 sounds. First, Stuart heard a loud noise that sounded like a grunt. It seemed like a person made that noise, and it didn't sound good. Stuart's mind immediately went to a heart attack, so he stayed on the line concerned about Dan. The second noise was a lot of different sounds that Stuart was unable to make out clearly. He wasn't sure if the phone had broken or maybe fallen, or was in a place where the noises were muffled, but he could hear what sounded like voices. He just couldn't make them out. The third sound was heavy, labored breathing, a slow breath in and then a slow breath out. over and over. Stewart yelled out to Dan saying, "Are you okay?" He repeated this about 3 or 4 times. He also asked if he could help Dan, but there was no response. So Stewart decided to hang up and try Dan again to see if there was a bad connection.
Unbeknownst to Stewart, around 10:55 a.m., James Geiger, Dan's neighbor, had heard a loud noise that sounded like a gunshot. As he got up to go to his front window that looks out to Trescott Drive to see what the noise could have been, he looked to the left, then he looked to the right, and as he looked to the right, he witnessed what appeared to be a light-colored Prius quickly backing out of Dan's driveway right next door. The car proceeded to head to the right towards Benton Road at a very high speed. That's what caught his attention. So James went over to Dan's house, saw his car idling in the driveway, and first thought nothing was wrong, and Dan was just getting ready to leave. So he went back home. But a couple minutes later, when Dan didn't leave, he became concerned and he headed back over. This time, he walked into Dan's garage, where he saw shattered glass all over the ground next to Dan's driver's side window. As he peered inside, he saw a man's head. It was covered in blood and slowly moving back and forth. It was Dan. And James yelled, "Danny, what happened?" But he didn't get a response. And again, James yelled, Danny, what happened?" And still nothing. At this point, James knew he needed help. So he reached for his cell phone, but he realized he left it back home. So he raced back over there and made a call to 911 at 11:02 a.m. to relay all of this to the operator. We played that entire 911 call in the last video, but it was nearly 15 minutes long. James told the 911 operator, quote, "His driver's side window was shattered and he's spattered and he can't answer. He's inside the car is running, and he's got blood all over his head. He's not responding to me," end quote.
While all that was going on, after hanging up, Stewart calls Dan back at 11 a.m. and his call goes straight to voicemail. At 11:01, Stewart texts Dan with, "Are you okay?" thinking that maybe something happened with Dan's speaker, but he knew he heard that labored breathing, and he knew something seemed very wrong, especially because he didn't get a response back from Dan. So Stewart started to Google Dan's address since it sounded like he had pulled into his driveway before the incident. Stewart looked up the Leon County property appraisal site to reverse look up Dan's address by putting in his name. After getting 2116 Trescott Drive, Stewart called 911 at 11:04 a.m. Here's the 911 call Stewart made about what he heard.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, 2116 Trescott. I was talking to somebody on the phone, and all of a sudden they kind of made a weird sound, and it sounded like they were breathing, labored breathing.
Stop. I'm talking to the police. Stop.
Stop. I'm sorry.
Okay, it looks like we already got a call about it. Wait 1 second.
Oh, you already got a call about it?
Wait a second, sir.
Okay.
Who are you speaking with?
Who are you speaking with, or who was I speaking to?
Who were you speaking to?
It was a friend of a friend. Let me say, Dan Markel is his name. The first time I've ever... Huh?
It looks like there was a traffic accident right in front of that place. That exact location, so that's
okay.
it. So, yep,
okay.
We are on the way.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.
As you heard, the operator informed Stewart that it appeared that they had already received a call about this incident. And I don't know if you heard the operator refer to it as a traffic accident in front of that place. Well, when James called, he asked for an ambulance, but due to a miscommunication, the call was not categorized as a medical emergency. Instead, for some reason, the operator thought it was a traffic accident of some kind. Don't ask me how their wires got that crossed, but I felt like James explained everything perfectly in his call. But this misunderstanding delayed medical help by an additional 20 minutes. An officer was dispatched at 11:07, and the first responder to the scene was Sergeant David Sims from the Tallahassee Police Department, which we will be abbreviating as the TPD going forward. At 11:17, Sergeant Sims arrived, and Dan's neighbor James Geiger met him out front of Dan's house and pointed to which house was Dan's. Sergeant Sims walked up to the open garage. He noticed a black Honda Accord parked inside. The doors were closed and the car was still running. As he got closer, he noticed a lot of broken glass on the ground outside the driver's side door. The driver's side window was partially broken out. Some glass remained, but there appeared to be a small half circle in the glass like a bullet went through the window. When the officer peered inside, he saw a man in the driver's seat, slumped over a little to the right. Sims attempted to open the door, but it was locked. He called out the name James had given him when he got on the scene. He said, "Daniel," but got no response. Sims could see the man inside the car was breathing, but gasping repetitively, and he wasn't moving. There was no response to any of the attempts to call out to him. So Sims went around to the passenger side, and that door was locked as well. So he slowly and carefully reached through the glass that was all shattered and broken, but still hanging there at the driver's side window, and used his pen to unlock the doors. Then went back to the passenger side, opened the car door, turned off the car, and took the keys out. By this time, he had already radioed for backup units, including EMS, and he could hear the sirens in the background. When he examined Dan's body, he noticed he was holding a cell phone in his left hand and had a business card in his right hand. There was half of his black eyeglasses laying in his lap, and the other half was lying on the floor beneath him. It looked like the frames were broken across the bridge of the nosepiece. EMS finally arrived on scene to assess the situation and work on extracting Dan from his vehicle. Once on a gurney with his head wrapped in a bandage, Sergeant Sims was joined by Officer Bill Brannon, who he briefed on the situation. They used the keys Sims had removed from Dan's car to open the front door of the house and look for clues. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle inside, and no one else there. The ambulance left the area around 11:28 a.m., and as all of this was going on, officials had put crime scene tape all around the house and also positioned squad cars about 3 or 4 houses down on both sides of Dan's home on Trescott Drive to block the road and set up a perimeter to prevent traffic from coming through until their initial investigation was complete. During the time that this was unfolding, James Geiger had provided as much information as he could to the officers on scene. He explained that Dan and Wendi had lived at that location for several years together with their 2 children, and that he thought that they had recently been divorced. But Wendi still came over to drop off or retrieve the kids on occasion. He was then asked what type of vehicle she drove, and he said it was a maroon-colored Honda Odyssey minivan. Officer Brannon, who was designated as one of the officers that was stationed at a squad car on the north side of Trescott that led out to Centerville Road, made note of the description of Wendi's car in case she attempted to come by, because of course, they don't want a loved one or Dan's children to stumble upon the scene. So they were made aware to be on the lookout for this vehicle.
After the area was cordoned off and Dan was being worked on, forensic specialist Joanne Maltese arrived on the scene to collect and preserve evidence. Joanne was able to photograph Dan, who was actually still alive. But soon after she did, EMS removed him from the scene and rushed him to Tallahassee Memorial Urgent Care Center and placed him on life support. His condition was grave and he wasn't expected to survive his injuries. Who would have done this to him? Of course, the police wanted to know, but first, evidence needs to be preliminarily gathered so that they can sort out details before they provide information to the families. Forensic specialist Maltese documented what she saw in Dan's car. There are pictures of the condition the vehicle was in, and for those watching, we do have the crime scene photos to show you. Otherwise, if you're listening, we'll describe them in detail for you. We explained that Dan's neighbor James had seen shattered glass below Dan's driver's side window. Here's those thousands of tiny pieces, as well as a small amount of blood on the ground that transferred there when Dan was moved. Dan's cell phone dropped to the floor when EMTs removed him. So did the half of his eyeglasses. Both can be seen on the ground amongst the shattered glass in this photo. Looking inside, there's more fragments of glass on the inside of Dan's car between the front seat and the driver's door, as well as right below where his feet would have been. Here's a close-up picture that shows the glass eyepiece of Dan's glasses amongst the shattered glass near the pedals. As explained, the driver's window had been busted out, and it had a clear half-circle shape in the glass that remained, showing where a projectile had gone through. Maltese also took photos of inside the passenger's side and the backseat of the car. We weren't 100% sure what that white cloth-like item was in the passenger seat. Perhaps it was a towel, an extra dress shirt, or maybe it was something EMS brought on scene. But it does look like there's blood on it. This was not a very bloody crime scene, and we'll explain all of that a little later. In the back seat were 2 car seats, as well as children's shoes and belongings. She also photographed Dan's wallet. and it showed the contents were still left in there. The bank cards, the money left behind in the wallet indicated that this was not a robbery gone wrong. At 12:30 p.m., an hour after Dan Markel had been carried away by the EMTs, Maltese was at his bedside collecting his clothing and swabs of evidence from his body. She photographed him again. This time, she focused on a dark area on his left forearm that had stippling on it. Stippling is the tattooing of the skin where superficial injury has occurred from unburnt gunpowder. It appears as tiny pinpoint abrasions and is present when someone is shot at close range. Stippling indicates that the muzzle of the gun was within 2 feet of the victim's body when it was discharged. She also removed a piece of glass that was embedded in Dan Markel's face.
Meanwhile, investigators are attempting to notify Dan's loved ones. However, it would prove to be a challenging task. Well, it wasn't hard for them to find Dan's ex-wife, Wendi. She lived right there in Tallahassee, but Dan's family was out in Canada, and it's harder to gather information for individuals overseas. 35-year-old Wendi Adelson's day on July 18, 2014 started like any other. She was living about 15 minutes northeast of where she and Dan had shared their once happy home on Trescott Drive that was now a crime scene. Wendi had been living at 3303 Aqua Ridge Way, a 2-story, 4-bedroom home for the past 2 years. She and Dan shared 50-50 custody of their sons with a weekly rotating schedule. Each parent would swap the kids every Friday after school, and that would be their week. However, in the middle of each week, the boys would spend Wednesday nights over the opposite parent's house to break up the week so that both Wendi and Dan didn't have to wait so long to be with their kids. It was Dan's week that week, and Wendi would be collecting the kids that Friday afternoon at 4:30 as per their settlement agreement. On the days she didn't have the kids, Wendi would try to get as much work done as possible, run her errands, plan appointments and social events, so on and so forth. That morning, she was working on an article that she planned to publish before the fall school year began. She also had an appointment with someone from the Geek Squad repair team from Best Buy. One of the boys had thrown a toy at her fairly new large screen TV that had been a gift from her older brother, Charlie, and the screen had cracked. The repairman was scheduled to come by sometime that day before noon to take a look. Then Wendi had lunch planned at 1 p.m. with her 2 psychiatrist friends, Janine Silberman and Ritu Guy. They were going to a popular restaurant in town called Mosaic, which was only about 10 minutes away from Wendi's home on Aqua Ridge. Later that night from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., Wendi had plans to attend a Stock the Bar party for her friends Lauren and Jamie's wedding shower. The invitation said it was a backyard gathering with drinks, appetizers, and games. Everyone who received an invitation was instructed to purchase a specific type of alcohol. Wendi's invitation said, "Help the bride and groom stock the bar for their wedding by bringing a bottle of Bullet Bourbon or your favorite wine or spirit." So Wendi knew she would have to stop at a liquor store sometime that afternoon to prepare for the party.
By 2:30 p.m., lead detective Craig Isom with the TPD was at Mosaic Restaurant approaching Wendi's table as she and her friends had just finished paying their bills. He asked if one of them was Wendi Adelson. When Wendi answered affirmatively, the investigator showcased his badge and introduced himself, apologizing for having to interrupt their meal, but said he was going to need Wendi to come with him to the police station in regard to an incident that occurred that morning. All 3 ladies looked shocked and confused, but Wendi did as she was told. She got up, followed Detective Isom, and she rode in his vehicle as they drove for the next 10 minutes or so until Wendi was placed in an interrogation room at the TPD. It was equipped with audio and video recording capabilities that would document the next 5 hours of Wendi's interview. The video of the interview begins around 2:45 p.m. Wendi was alone for the first few minutes. During that time, she received a notification on her phone. It was a call she missed from a real estate agent. She left Wendi a voice message, and Wendi listened to it before a detective joined her in the room. Right when Detective Isom returned, Wendi told him that she just heard a voice message from a real estate agent that there was a shooting on Trescott Drive. The detective said, "Yeah, that's what this is about," and he apologized to Wendi that she had to find out that way. Then he requested that the message be played for him, so Wendi hit play and let him listen.
Okay. I just listened to my voicemail.
What'd you hear? Who was your voicemail?
It's from Lisa Carey, who is my real estate agent, or who I had gone with to find a house. She just said she was driving around town and she heard there was a shooting on Trescott.
Yeah, that's what this is about. I'm sorry you had to hear it that way.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if I should.
It's all right, just leave it there. Is it still on?
It's right there.
And you want to just hit play again for me?
Sure.
Hey, it's Lisa Curie. It is Friday, and I feel like an idiot doing this, but I just heard that there was a shooting over on Trescott, and I promise I'm not trying to be dramatic or even nosy. I don't know, just checking on you, my friend. I hope all is well. I hope your sweet boys are well, and if there's anything you need, let me know. It just ran a chill down my spine when I heard that there was something going on Trescott. All right, 212-3083. Hope all is well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
That's all right, you can stop it. Or does it stop automatically?
It's done.
In case that wasn't clear, the woman said that she had heard there was a shooting on Trescott, and she wasn't trying to be dramatic or nosy, but she just wanted to check on Wendi and the boys to make sure everything was okay because a chill ran down her spine when she heard something had gone down on Trescott Drive. Now, for the record, Trescott Drive isn't a very long road. It's not highly traveled. It's a residential street about a mile long from one end to the other, with one main entrance and exit off a through road called Centerville, and the other small road called Benton that connects to Thomasville Road, which is one of the city's busiest main north and southbound roads that runs through Tallahassee. We're not mentioning all this for nothing. It's definitely going to be a very important aspect of this case in determining calculation, planning, and guilt. You just have to wait. But Trescott itself is like a little neighborhood road consisting of maybe 95 homes, if that. It's a small, shadowy, somewhat winding two-way street with a number of speed humps designed for a slower pace through the family-friendly area. Some parts have a posted speed limit of only 15 miles per hour, with the rest of the road at a posted 25 miles per hour. The fact that Wendi and Dan are well known in Tallahassee, not just for their positions as professors at the university, but also their toxic divorce, people familiar with them would know they lived on Trescott Drive at one point, and that Dan still did. He even had students over to his house on a number of occasions for dinner. I'm sure if any of us heard that there was a shooting on a road that one of our friends or even our acquaintances lived on, we would be immediately concerned for their well-being. It's almost an automatic response. That's exactly what Wendi's real estate agent did, and this reaction will become important.
So let's go back to that interview with Wendi. Detective Isom asked for Wendi's identification, so she hands over her driver's license. After seeing her last name is Adelson and not Markel, he confirmed with Wendi that she never took Dan's last name, to which she replied that was correct. That's another fact we mentioned in part 1. Wendi retained her maiden name and didn't even hyphenate it to add Markel. Again, we're mentioning this for a reason. Just bank it in your memory for now.
Okay. Do you have your identification with you? So you never took the last name of Markel?
No.
Since we have this recorded interview, we're going to play portions of it for you because I think it's important to hear and see Wendi's reaction to hearing the news and what she provided as information in this case. But of course, we cannot include a 5-hour plus interview. However, I will link it below from a channel called Red Circle Interrogation and Confessions if you'd like to watch the whole thing later, but don't go there now because we're going to provide you the most important and relevant parts and explain the context of others so we can summarize everything for you. We're also going to provide things like info from Wendi's call records because in the beginning of this interview, Detective Isom takes Wendi's phone and conducts a data dump. So they already had a digital timeline. They just wanted to make sure that Wendi could confirm it with her own words. Here's what happens when Wendi finds out the terrible news.
There was a shooting at your home or your ex-husband's home at 2116 Trescott. Okay. Your ex-husband, Daniel, all right, has been taken to the hospital. He's not going to survive.
Oh my God.
Okay?
I'm sorry, I have a message from him this morning.
before we get into everything, I have to establish where you were and who you were with and so forth. Okay? And then once we've established all that, I can give you more details.
Okay.
Do you understand why I wanted you to come here before I discuss this?
Oh my God. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, you have nothing to be sorry about.
I just don't understand. How did this happen?
Can you let me get over this hump, okay? Can we do that first?
Detective Isom remained quiet as Wendi sobbed after she was told that Dan was shot and not expected to survive. But he needs to get back to business. So we said, can we just get over this hump of gathering Wendi's information and timeline of events for that day? Now, instead of playing this all the way through in the order in which the interview progressed, we cut it up in clips and edited them together so that we can show you exactly what Wendi said in more of a chronological order. Her version of events was all over the place, as you can imagine. She's piecing together her day after hearing the tragic news.
We want to add this part showing Detective Isom asking Wendi if she can give permission to download the data off her phone. Detective Isom asked if she had a problem with that, to which she responded no, but she wanted to know if she was going to get her phone back. She anticipated all the people who would be trying to reach out to her that night, including her family, who she had yet to notify about what happened to Dan. And she knew she wanted to make contact with them. The detective assured her that they would only need her device for a short time to retrieve all that data, and then they would return it to her before she went home that evening. But of course, that would be a few hours from now. Wendi signs the release, and Isom hands her phone over to the forensics team.
Stupid question, but are you going to give it back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I feel like I need to help my family. What's going on?
No, you're going to get it back. It's just I'm trying to expedite this now so I can get it back to you sooner.
I understand.
Be right back.
Isom starts at the beginning. He asked Wendi when she woke up that morning, and she said a little before 8 a.m. She knew that because that morning she had an appointment with the TV repairman. She told Isom he was scheduled to come by anywhere between 8 and 12 p.m. And she hadn't set an alarm that morning. So when she woke up, she quickly began getting ready. Looking at her phone call log, she told Isom the repair guy called her at 8:08 a.m. Then Wendi's mother, Donna, called her a minute later at 8:09 a.m. Wendi missed that call. Still, she called Donna back within the same exact minute. I'm unsure if they talked because she didn't mention it, but Donna tried calling Wendi again within the same minute, 8:09, but Wendi missed it again. They were playing phone tag. Apparently, Donna had been calling Wendi that morning regarding the TV repair appointment. I'm assuming Donna or Charlie, who bought the TV, must have set it up. Or Donna was an alternative contact on the appointment because Wendi mentioned that the repair guy called Donna too. And to confirm this part, Wendi's phone records do show Donna texted Wendi at 8:11 saying, quote, "Best Buy just called me, but I told them to confirm with you. They are on their way over now to help you with the TV sets in your living room." End quote. Wendi told Isom she thought the repairman got there between 8 and 9, but probably closer to 9, and then he left around 10 a.m. To confirm this, she said she could provide Isom with his name and everything, and they could ask him for his records too.
I was trying to do all I can before meeting my two friends at 1.
Okay, who was at your house this morning?
The only person that was at my house this morning was a guy from Best Buy because my TV was broken and it's under warranty.
Easy for you.
Yeah, I figured.
Okay, a guy from Best Buy was at your house to work on your TV?
I have his name and everything at the house if you want it, because the boys broke the TV, so he gave me a choice of fixing it or getting a new one.
What time did he come to the house?
He called me at around 8. He was probably there until around 10.
What time did you wake up this morning?
A little before 8. I know that because the repairman was supposed to be here between 8 and 12, and I didn't set an alarm. So I woke up like, oh God, I need to put some clothes on and get ready.
Okay. What? At 8 o'clock.
He called, or like my mom called. I could see what time the calls came in, but let's see, starting this morning. Yeah, my mom called at 8:09. And then the repair guy called at 8:08, and then my mom called at 8:09. I guess he called her to trying to so then the repair guy called, and I don't remember exactly what time he got there, but like between 8 and 9, probably closer to 9.
Okay, what time did he leave?
Around 10. He could probably tell you, like he'll have a record of what time he called in to figure out whether to repair it or buy a new one.
Okay.
So he'll have a record of his calls too.
Okay, before 10 a.m.? A little before 10 a.m. he left. Okay.
Now, in order to give Ice some context on the next events in Wendy's day, which was a call that she received from Dan, she gave him a short backstory, explaining that she had put in an application for their older son, 5-year-old Ben, at a local charter school called the School of Arts and Sciences, abbreviated going forward as SAS. And Ben was picked from a lottery to attend. Now, a side note is that when you are outside the boundary of a charter school, your kids don't have priority. So they have to resort to having their names drawn randomly, especially charters that are in high demand. My daughter went through this, so I do have personal knowledge. So it's kind of an exciting time because he got in and now you have to make your choice and you have a limited time to do so. So Wendi explained that the assistant principal, Aaron Lombardo, had called sometime that week. Wendi couldn't recall the exact day, but it was before Thursday. She and Dan were trying to figure out if it was a good option for Ben, and we know that Dan took issue with it. We told you earlier that Dan went one step further and had been speaking to one of the teachers when he was shot. Well, Wendi explained to Isom that she and Dan had to make a decision about whether Ben would register for kindergarten at SAS by Monday, because that was the cutoff date. But Wendi had recently lost her voice, so she and Dan hadn't really had a chance to speak about the situation. She had now gotten her voice back, so they planned to talk about it sometime that day, since Dan was actually leaving for a conference in New York that weekend and probably wouldn't be home until the middle of the next week. At 9:02 a.m., while the repairman was over her house, Wendi received a call from Dan, but she had her ringer off and she missed his call. However, he left her a voice message about when he would be available to talk.
The agreement was that you're all going to have some type of phone call at 11:15 this morning. Is that correct?
Well, not exactly. Just that we needed to have the talk at some point before. We have to decide before Monday of what to do about his school, where Ben's going to go to school. I mean, I had lost my voice earlier this week, and so we had put off this conversation about our son's school and where he was going to go.
Did you have a contact person at this prospective school for one of your kids? Who was that?
Danny and I both talked to her. So it's a woman named Erin Lombardo. I think she might be the assistant principal there. So
what's the name of the school?
It's the School of Arts and Sciences.
Okay.
It's a charter school in town, and I had put in an application for Ben, and he got picked from the lottery to go. And so they called, can find when they called. I think it was, they probably called Monday. I can't actually remember what day. They called at some point this week, maybe Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday maybe. And then Danny and I were trying to figure out whether this was a good option for him. And so what night did I was at work on Thursday morning. So I talked to Erin Lombardo Thursday morning, and she said that she'd had a lengthy conversation with Danny the night before. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, you have to do this twice. And she's like, I'm used to blended families. It's okay. And so he had a long conversation with her Wednesday night. I had a long conversation with her Thursday morning. Well, that's him calling in at 9:02.
He called you at 9:02?
He called me at 9:02.
Mm-hmm.
The repair guy was there, and honestly, I leave my ringer off a lot of the time, so I didn't even hear the call come in. He left me a message. He went to like a workout class at the gym.
At Premier.
At Premier.
Mm-hmm.
Said, I'm going to be out of it by such and such a time. You could call me then.
Per court records, we know that Dan's message said, quote, I'm going to be at the gym from probably between 9:15 to 10:30, but I'm happy to chat or meet with you. Maybe we can go on a walk at school or something like that. Let me know. End quote. Well, at 9:15, Dan sends Wendi a text, which Wendi relays to Detective Isom saying their last interaction wasn't nice. This exchange was in regard to Dan's plans with the boys after preschool. They wanted to take them swimming at the pool until Wendy's pickup at 4:30, but Wendi apparently wanted to go get them earlier at 3.
Sorry, you okay?
Yeah. No.
I meant to.
It's fine. Our last interaction wasn't nice.
What are you talking about, personal?
Yeah, I'm just looking here. I didn't want to take the boys this afternoon. I had wanted to have them. And I talked over with my brother and realized, if their dad wants to take them swimming, it's not worth getting upset over. He sent me that message at 9:15 this morning.
Then, per phone records, we know that Wendi made a phone call to her brother Charlie at 9:19 a.m. Remember that he's the one that bought her the TV, and they were discussing how much the repairman said it was going to cost to fix it, or whether she should just get a new one and replace it. It turned out it wasn't worth repairing, so ultimately Wendi planned to get a new TV. I have no idea if she or Charlie was going to pay for it. But on the same call, Wendi most likely also discussed the text exchange that she just had with Dan, because her and Charlie's call was 18 minutes and 17 seconds in length. And in the interview with Isom, Wendi mentioned she spoke to her brother that morning and she talked about the situation with him and realized Dan just wanted to take the boys swimming. It wasn't worth getting upset over. She also mentioned she was making some breakfast, oatmeal, the kind that takes a long time to cook. And I thought it was weird. She was like, it's the kind that takes a long time because you have to keep stirring. And I'm like, what kind of oatmeal is that?
And the information for Best Buy for the service tech that was there, that's at your house?
Mm-hmm. I'd be happy. I mean, if someone wants to
we'll
back
get
with
that.
me.
We'll get that. And that was basically from when he came out there to serve, I guess to replace the TV.
He came out to fix it and then told me that what was wrong with it wasn't fixable.
Right.
And so I called Charlie to find out, should I buy a new one or should I fix this one? And he was like, just buy a new one.
And then you went back to working on papers and so forth?
Yeah, I was making some breakfast. I remember I was making oatmeal, so it was taking a while. It was like that kind that you have to stir for a long time. And I was talking to Charlie, so there's my call to Charlie.
We introduce you to Charlie Adelson in part 1. He's the middle child of the 3 Adelson children. Robert is the oldest. He lives in New York, and he is not close with his family. Then there's Charlie, who lives down in Fort Lauderdale and is close with his parents, and Wendi is the baby of the family. After the repairman left at about 10 a.m., Wendi's phone records show that Charlie made another call to Wendi at 10:06 a.m. That call only lasted 11 seconds. There was no comment about whether this was a phone call or a voice message. But in between working on her paper, Wendi said for the next hour or so, she made phone calls with friends. At 10:24 a.m., she called her friend Renee that was supposed to be coming into town that day for an interview at FSU. They talked for 18 minutes. So now we're up to 10:42 a.m. Wendi said she went back working until 11:22, and then she called her friend Tova. She said she never answered, so she left her a message. Wendi even tells Isom she's happy to sign a waiver to allow them to go look at her computer and download all the data to show exactly what time she saved all of her documents, and she sent emails so that they could account for her time. This specific time is important because investigators have a rough estimate of the time frame in which Dan was shot. It would have been after 10:42 a.m. So they really want to nail down Wendi's whereabouts.
And then I called Renee, my friend who's interviewing for a job at FSU today. She was driving in, and I wanted to wish her good luck and see if I could meet her for a hug at some point today.
Okay.
So that was at 10:24. I called my friend Tova back at 11:22. I think I was just, in between working on the paper, being distracted.
So between 10:24 and 11:22, all right, 10:24, you're talking to Renee.
I talked to her for 18 minutes.
Okay, so now we're up to 1024, 424 plus 18, we're at 40 something.
42?
42?
Yeah. Then I went back to working.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm getting down to this, I'm trying to whittle this down with what they pulled from your phone. So at 10:42, you're done with the call from Renee.
Yeah.
And you don't make another call again, according to what I have here. You called Tova.
At 11:22.
At 11:22. So between 10:42.
I worked for a total of like 20 minutes. It's a good thing I'm not on a timesheet.
Okay. So from 10:42.
And you know what? If you took my computer, you could probably find records of like what time I saved the document. And I'd be happy to sign a waiver so you could look at my computer.
And 10:42 to 11:22, you're working on papers.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you remember the call to Tova.
Mm-hmm.
And that was,
I just left her. She had called. I was just returning her call.
Okay.
So I just left a message. Once again, it'll be good. I'll get you my computer if you want to take a look at the documents.
I just have to validate all of this. That's all. So,
and you could probably go to my email records, which you should have. When you guys did the phone, you did the email records, so you would have of like what time I sent messages.
Were you sending email messages during those times?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Between 10:42 and 11:22.
I think so, because I don't remember exactly what time, but before I left the house at noon, I sent off the like edits, like the citations to the law school library to have someone look at my citations on this paper that's due that I no longer care about.
Isom wanted to know if Wendi had any more contact with Dan that day, so she explained she decided to call Dan at 11:42 a.m. since he was supposed to be done with his workout class by then. He didn't answer, so she left him a 27-second message saying that she's ready to talk to him about Ben's schooling and that she assumed she would see him around 4:30 p.m. when they exchanged the kids. We know that Dan was already shot almost an hour before this call.
And I called, but I think we could see what time I called him. I thought it was more of like, let's see, recent. I called him at 11:42 and got his answering machine. It's probably just 27 seconds. I just left him a message, just saying, okay, I want to talk about school for Ben, and I assume I'll see you at 4:30 today. When I figured he's going to take the kids swimming, and he'll drop them at the house at 4:30. Okay.
So in other words, the whole meeting at 10:30 or 11:15 didn't happen. Right. And this is all at your house?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At this point, Isom wants to know when Wendi left her house. She says she thinks she left around noon. She wanted to take a shower, but she was now running behind for lunch, and she repeats a couple times that she left her house around noon. He wants to know if she has anything proving when she left. Looking at her phone, she then states that the only thing she has is a call to her friend Joe Davis. She says she called him from her car at 12:27 p.m. He was the first call she made as she was pulling out of her driveway. He picked up, but he was busy, so she called her friend Laura at 12:29. She didn't pick up, so she left a message. She then called her friend Jeff Sopek to catch up on his new baby. They talked for about 16 minutes as she drove. Of course, they have her GPS records, and they do confirm this. Records show that she did probably leave the house around 12:30 because of that call to Jeff was long enough to really track her movements. It began at 12:31 p.m., and she was already down the street from her house, heading south.
I was going to take a shower, but I didn't. I ran out of time. I did laundry, and then I left the house around noon.
Okay. And so how can we say, do you have some way of showing a timeline of when
I sent email?
No, when you left the house.
Oh, yeah. So the only thing I have that is, the only thing that I guess I have is I was waiting to call back this colleague of mine, Joe Davis, and I called him from the car at 12:27. And he was the first call I made as I was pulling out of the driveway. So that was like 12:27.
That's leaving the house.
That was leaving the house. So I got into the car, I put on my earpiece, I called Joe. And Joe was busy with a colleague. And then I was returning phone calls. I called back this woman, Laura. That was at 12:29. And then I called my friend Jeff Skopek, lives in Boston, just had a baby. And so I was catching up with him about his baby. And we were on the phone about 16 minutes.
Joe Davis was the one at 1227?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I actually spoke with Joe. Laura, I left a message. And then Jeff, I spoke with for a while. And then the connection cut out. Tried him back again. We talked for a few minutes. Connection cut out again. And I was like, I'm at lunch. I'll just call him back later.
Wendi was almost done wrapping up her timeline for that day. She just had to account for what she did between leaving her house and arriving at Mosaic to meet her friends. And this is when she makes what appears to be a startling revelation. We'll let you hear it for yourself.
Oh my God. And I tried to drive up Trescott and I saw that it was blocked.
It was blocked at some point. I'm not sure what time it was blocked.
And I just thought, there's maybe some trees down or something. Cause sometimes...
Oh, you're saying as you drove down which one of the side roads?
Wow. Okay. So remember we said we were telling you all about Trescott Drive and what kind of street it is. We told you that for a reason. And this is the reason. Wendi apparently drove right up to the crime scene perimeter that was blocked off, where Officer Brandon's squad car and yellow police tape with the words crime scene, do not enter on it. So I'm going to show a picture of this because we do have one. There's a squad car. On it is the tape. It's going from one side of the street to the other.
What are the chances?
Right. Wasn't she in a rush to get to lunch at Mosaic, which was only a 10-minute drive to the west of her house? Why then would she be cleared to the south by another 12 minutes or so?
Sounds like a detour.
A detour. It's quite a bit out of the way, especially for a woman who said that she didn't even have some time to shower. And if you look at her and you can see this interview, she's pretty disheveled. For a woman that's as put together as Wendi, it doesn't look like she put a lot of effort into her look that day at all. But Wendi explained she needed to go pick up that bottle of bourbon for the Stock the Bar party that night. So she had to go stop by ABC Liquor. She was on the phone with her friend Jeff, so she wasn't really paying attention, but she saw Trescott was blocked, so she just turned around and took another route to the liquor store. She said that sometimes when she lived there would be trees that fell down or electrical things that would occur, so she just figured that's what it was. And now she states that she left her house around 12:15. She said she was doing all that she could before her lunch at 1 o'clock, like getting the bourbon, getting gas for her car, getting some super glue for one of the boys' broken toys. And it sounds like a lot to squeeze in such a rush.
When I'm going to a friend's party tonight and it's oh my God, what am I even talking about? I needed to buy, it's a stock the shelf engagement party, and so I went to buy bourbon. Okay. So I went to drive from my place up Trescott to get to ABC Liquor, and it was blocked, so I just turned around. I was on the phone at the time. I wasn't paying a lot of attention. Right. So I just turned around and drove up the other way. I just thought, sometimes when I lived there were electrical things that would happen. I left my house around 12:15 because I thought I'll get the bourbon and then I'll get some gas for the car and I get super glue for one of the boys' toys. And I was trying to do all I can before meeting my two friends at 1.
Detective Isom wants to clarify, and we already know why, and you will too in a moment. So he repeats the reason why Wendi said she was over near Trescott so that he had a clear understanding. Here's the interaction with Isom and Wendi explaining how she ended up near the crime scene.
I was going to take a shower, but I didn't. I ran out of time. I did laundry, and then I left the house around noon.
To go to the liquor store and the stuff for the party?
Yeah.
Okay, you went down which road you said?
I went down Trescott.
Okay. I
saw a police car there, and I just thought it's blocked, so I just turned around and drove to, I went down the rest of Centerville, went up Benton, took Benton across, went to ABC Liquors, bought the bourbon. You
leave your house around noon, drive down, Trescott's blocked, you turn around, you go back around on Benton, and then you go to
There's a tree.
Right. Pardon?
I thought it was like a tree that fell down or something.
Right. So
I didn't even think, that's the house. I saw a few houses blocked off, and
Here's the thing. Wendi lives clear on the other side of town, actually close to Mosaic, the restaurant she's supposed to be at. This is not near Trescott. So of course, Detective Isom, who's very familiar with this area, is perplexed about why Wendi would drive so far out of her way to just backtrack to the restaurant when she's clearly strapped for time. This will be very important as this case progresses. It's pivotal, as we explained, when it comes to determining calculation, planning, and even guilt in some aspects. So pay attention. Detective Isom confronts Wendi, telling her he's confused about this route. So let's listen while I map out what she's saying on the screen for those that are watching.
I'm a little confused. You're up on Centerville Road. What's your purpose of driving down Trescott?
It's usually the shortcut to get to Monroe.
To get to Monroe?
I usually take it as a cut through to get to Thomasville or Monroe.
Okay, all right, so you...
I don't know why I said Monroe. I was thinking Mosaic, Monroe, Thomasville.
Okay, so when you come down into town on Centerville...
I almost always cut through Trescott.
Just drive by your old house?
Well, I do it as a way of, like, coming to terms with the divorce. But, yeah, sometimes I drive there. If I'm too sad, I drive around.
Okay.
If the kids aren't home and I know they're not home, I feel better about driving by the house. But, yeah, it's shorter, and I just usually drive by.
It's shorter than going all the way down to Benton?
All the way down Centerville and around Benton. It's just a shortcut I always took.
Okay, so you turned around and went back to Centerville, I take it?
Yeah.
Down to Benton? And went to the liquor store down there on Thomasville?
Yeah.
The one at Benton Road?
ABC Liquors, it's at, Benton. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Though it seems like Wendi has a reasonable answer as to why she ended up near the crime scene, Isom questions her about just randomly coming into town to drive by her old house in the past. And her answer was that yes, sometimes she does that as a way of coming to terms with a divorce, especially if she knows that the boys are not going to be at Dan's house because she doesn't want to drive by and there's a chance they might see her and get sad. And I'm sorry if this sounds like a broken record, but this woman said multiple times that she's in a rush. She's running late. She didn't have time to shower yet. She's calling this a shortcut, and I call it bullshit. If you're not familiar with my style of storytelling, I'm really big on timelines and locations, and something about this did not sit right with me at all from the moment I heard her say it, especially when I mapped it myself. We're living in the age of GPS. Wendi has an iPhone. We can see it in this interview. Apple has multiple apps that's available for driving directions, including the built-in Apple Maps. And most of us, when we're in a rush, we map the closest route to where we need to be. And she most likely already knew where Mosaic was because it's in a very popular area of town off Market Street. Village Square area is where everybody goes grocery shopping. They eat at restaurants. They visit liquor stores because there are at least 3 right next to Mosaic. There's Total Wine and More, just 3 minutes away. Market Square Liquors, 2 minutes away. Plus, you've got Publix Supermarket, 4 minutes away, that carries all kinds of liquor. Now, I know that Wendi could argue they wouldn't have Bullet Bourbon, but the invitation says you can bring that or any of your favorite wine or spirits. So for someone in a rush, wouldn't these 3 locations make a lot more sense? She could have even visited them after eating, since the party wasn't until 6:30 p.m. She didn't have to get the boys until 4:30. And if she had gone to Dan's at that time, then ABC Liquor would have been just minutes away. Unless she never planned to go to Dan's because she knew that he would be dead. Maybe curiosity got the better of her, so she felt compelled to take a peek to see if the job had been done. Better yet, maybe it was her job to confirm that it was. Either way, it seems pretty convenient that Wendi now had a few alibis or excuses for being in that area.
Right. She was on the phone with a friend. When she drove by, they would have phone records, which means they'd also have a witness to interview, plus GPS to track her as she talked to her friend Jeff. It would be even more perfect if she had the receipt from the purchase at ABC Liquor to prove that she was there. She makes sure to make a joke sometime during this interview that her grandma always told her, you can't have your tuchus in 2 places at once.
My grandmother once said, you can't have your tuchus in 2 places at once.
And guess what? That's exactly what Isom asked Wendi next, whether she had made a purchase. Let's see what she says.
All right, did you make a purchase there?
Yeah.
And that was sometime after 12?
Probably 12:30. And then I called my friend Jeff Skopek. I was on the phone with him on the way to the liquor store. I spoke with for a while, and then the connection cut out. I went into the liquor store. I tried him back again. We talked for a few minutes. Connection cut out again.
Okay. When you went to the liquor store, did you already know what you're going to get, or you had to?
Yeah, I had the name of, I don't know bourbon, but I was supposed to go to this party tonight. It's like a stock the bar party, and
right.
So I asked my friend what do they like, and she wrote down the name of the type of bourbon. So I went in the store to get Bulleit bourbon. And so I asked the guy in the store, like, where's your bourbon? And so he showed it to me, and I found it.
Plus, that bottle of bourbon was conveniently left in Wendy's car on the front passenger seat in the bag from ABC Liquor, and the receipt was right next to it.
And there are a few things we need to unpack here. But before I do, I stand corrected on something that I was asked about in the comment section of the last video. Someone said Wendi wore colored contacts. Now, I was assuming they meant that she did not have blue eyes. She does have blue eyes. But according to both this interview and the book that I read regarding this case called Extreme Punishment by attorney Stephen Epstein, Wendi wore what are called color enhancers. And she only told a few very close friends and also Detective Isom she would wear turquoise ones over her already blue eyes. And if anyone would be an expert on color contacts, it's me. I've been wearing them since 7th grade and I still do to this day. And I've even done videos on them. I've had hundreds of pairs. So I know what color enhancers are. They're not opaque. They just give you a little hint of color to make your eyes look a lot more bold. I don't think that this is really important in the grand scheme of things. However, Wendi does her own little damsel in distress act, like batting her pretty turquoise eyes. So that definitely does have something to do with this case.
Exactly. Another alibi, the man who commented on her eyes. She probably struck up a conversation on purpose so that someone would remember her. It's very convenient. I'm sure she made sure he wouldn't forget those big old blue eyes. And this confused Detective Isom. He even questioned her why someone would comment on her eyes. So he asked Wendi if she wore contacts, to which she stated yes. She also made sure to stop at a gas station. You can never have too many CCTV cameras and receipts to mark your location, can you?
No, you can have as many as you need, and you should have as many as you can get.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And I talked to a guy there because I don't really buy much alcohol, and so they wanted bourbon, and I asked the guy, we had a whole conversation about bourbon and
right.
My eyes,
your eyes?
He just said your eyes are really blue,
right.
And
you have contacts?
I do.
Okay. So you just went, he pointed out where the bourbon was?
Yeah.
And you go there and you just grab the brand that's familiar by the name?
Yeah, that's what they said they wanted. So.
Okay, so you didn't discuss with the clerk whether this good, whether it's bad?
The only thing I said I discussed is I walked over and he was like, can I see your ID? And I was like, why are you laughing? I could be 18.
Okay.
I was like, and so I was like, I love to be asked how old I am. I'm like, I'm old as dirt. Here you go.
Did you ever leave your house before you went to the liquor store and got turned around on Prescott?
No.
Never left?
No.
Okay.
So I bought the bourbon and got some gas on Thomasville and met my friends at Mosaic.
Which gas station did you go to on Thomasville?
The one that's, I always forget the name, but the one that's close to the cross street. It's right next to the Goodwill.
Okay.
If you're heading north on Thomasville, if you're heading north on Thomasville, it's on your right.
Okay. Just past the Goodwill
Just
place?
past the Goodwill. It's close to the intersection there.
Okay. All right. And then from that point, you went straight to the
Went to Mosaic.
Mosaic restaurant?
And met friends there. I used to have kind of a steady Friday meeting, and I hadn't seen my two friends in a while. And so we had made plans to meet up.
What time did you get to Mosaic?
About 1. I was a little late. We were supposed to meet at 1, and I got there a few minutes after.
Okay.
Remember how Officer Brandon was instructed to specifically be on the lookout for Wendi's vehicle at the perimeter? Well, of course, he had his notepad with him that day, as usual, and took down a note in regard to his encounter with a vehicle matching the description he was given.
All right, what is a crime scene perimeter?
Basically cording off an area with crime scene tape and making sure no citizens come in the crime scene area.
And where was the crime scene tape set up that you assisted with holding?
Approximately a few houses north of the victim's residence on Trescott.
And would that be toward Centerville Road or the other direction?
Well, if you go on way around Centerville, Trescott, it would eventually hit Centerville.
But it would be between the crime scene and Centerville Road?
Yes.
If you were just passing by Trescott Road on Centerville Road, would you have been able to observe the crime scene tape?
From Centerville Road?
Yes, sir.
No.
Why not?
There's a considerable distance between there, and it also kind of curves around.
So you knew going in what Miss Adelson's car looked like?
At some point after arrival, I was made aware of what
her vehicle looked like?
Yes, sir.
At that point, did you know that she was an ex-wife?
From what I'd been told on scene, it appeared that there was a separation or split or something. The first person to tell me that they believed they were separated was the neighbor who had called 911.
Mr. Geiger?
Yes, sir.
So you interviewed Mr. Geiger?
Yes, sir. I was just told, be on the lookout for the vehicle.
During the time that you were holding the perimeter, that just means sitting there and making sure nobody comes through the tape, correct?
Yes.
All right. During the time that you were doing that, did you see a particular vehicle of interest pull up?
Yes, a mid to late 2000 Honda Odyssey van.
Did you have a notepad with you in your vehicle?
I always have one with me.
Did you take notes of which vehicles came down Trescott and turned around?
Only the one that was of concern.
Okay. And you took a specific note with regards to this vehicle?
Basically that I'd seen a vehicle matching that of the description known to be driven by the ex-wife.
And the vehicle that approached the crime scene tape would have had to turn onto Trescott and come a considerable distance down Trescott to get to the crime scene tape where you were?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And is this vehicle similar in make, model, and color as the one that you saw?
Yes, ma'am.
Would the view that this driver of the van that approached the tape have had, would that driver have had a clear view of Mr. Markel's driveway?
Should have been.
And would the person driving the van have been able to observe at the time that person pulled up that there were emergency vehicles present in the driveway of Dan Markel?
It should be evident. There's plenty of emergency response vehicles and stuff on scene. Okay. We're only, like I said, approximately a few houses down.
What emergency vehicles were present at the scene at the time that vehicle pulled up?
There was probably approximately 4 or 5 patrol cars, the marked patrol cars. At least one of the crime scene vehicles, which is also marked with police on it, and then some of the investigators.
And your vehicle, was that a marked patrol vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you seated inside the vehicle, or were you standing outside the vehicle?
I was seated inside.
Okay. And did this person in the van get out or attempt to interact with you at all or ask you anything?
No, ma'am.
What we can gather from Officer Brannon is that he interviewed Dan's neighbor, James Geiger. He explained that Wendi and Dan were divorced and gave that description of the type of vehicle she drove. Brannon was told to be on the lookout for that vehicle, and he sees a vehicle matching that description. So he informs the investigator. We also know that the perimeter was set up approximately 3 to 4 houses down from Dan's on both sides. And for that vantage point where the driver of the minivan would have been, they would have had a clear view of Dan Markel's driveway. And they would have been able to see that there was police activity in Dan's driveway. There were a number of emergency vehicles present, 4 to 5 patrol cars, 1 crime scene vehicle, and some investigators. Yet the person who Brannon believed was Wendi Adelson never stopped to ask what was going on. She didn't get out of the car. She didn't ask him any questions. And she pretty smoothly made a 3-point turn and just drove away without any hesitation. Whereas other vehicles that he saw that day would pull up to the scene. They would pause because all of us are so nosy, especially if it's the street we live on. They would possibly come up with a new plan because they didn't plan for this. They'd sit there for a second and then they turn around.
And could you describe how the vehicle, what happened once it pulled up?
Just came up and made a 3-point turn and turned around and left the area.
All right. And did it do so? I'm assuming other vehicles probably did the same thing during that time frame you were holding the perimeter, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Because there was no ingress or egress down Trescott past that point, correct?
No.
All right. And the vehicle, did this vehicle turn around in any different fashion from the other ones that you observed turning around?
There seemed to be a little less hesitation compared to other vehicles.
Can you describe what you mean by that?
Average citizens would be pulling up, and there's that kind of pause where I guess they're formulating a new plan, like, oh, I can't go the way I was planning on going. And then, they kind of sit there for a second, and then they'll eventually turn around and go. The way I remember it, this van, just came right up, made the 3-point turn and left. Nothing crazy. It wasn't squealing tires or anything crazy like that, though.
Okay. And would your vehicle have been readily visible to the person in the van?
Yes. I had the emergency lights activated also.
The person didn't stop and ask you what's going on, right?
No.
The person didn't get out screaming, oh my God, that's my ex-husband's house, right?
No.
You would agree with me that may be considered a normal response to seeing law enforcement and crime scene and EMS and somebody that you had a relationship with, that's their house, right?
Quite possibly.
The car in question didn't stop, right?
No, sir.
Okay. Didn't stop to inquire to you as to what's going on, right?
No, sir.
Didn't get out of the car?
No, sir.
Didn't ask you any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Pretty smoothly made a 3-point turn and drove away, right?
Correct.
Also, despite Wendi saying that she thought maybe a tree had fallen or an electrical thing happened, I told you that this tape specifically was used for investigations because it said crime scene on it. Brandon stated that a reasonable person would think that something relatively serious was going on with a number of vehicles that were present. And I think we can agree that Wendi is a reasonable person. And it could also be argued that she had more knowledge of things like a crime scene because she's a lawyer. She's trained in these type of situations. Like, even if you only went to law school like me and don't have a license to practice, you've taken criminal law.
Trescott Drive, you set up crime scene tape.
I'm not sure if I'm the one who actually set up the crime scene tape. I can't remember if that was me or somebody else had put it up.
It's common tape that you guys use to secure an area, right?
If there's an investigation going on, not for just any traffic crash or anything like that.
It just says crime scene. It's a yellow tape that we all know.
Yes, sir. I would think that a reasonable person would think that it was something relatively serious going on with a number of vehicles there and all that kind of stuff, though.
So the normal response would have at least been to inquire, correct?
I can't say what her normal response was because I don't know what her role exactly was.
I think you know why we're making all of these points. Recall we mentioned her real estate agent calling Wendi as soon as she was aware that a shooting had occurred on Trescott. Even she was concerned about Wendi and her boys. Yet this woman, whose children are not with her, who knows they would have been in their father's custody the night before and in that very house that day before bringing them to preschool, doesn't stop on that street that her ex-husband lives on, doesn't ask the officer what's happening, doesn't yell, that's where my children live. That's my old house. That's my ex-husband's driveway. Not at all. She doesn't even pause. It's as though she was anticipating it. And that's how Brandon made it sound anyway. That drivers had to rethink their route, but not Wendi. Maybe it was because all those times that trees had fallen.
A lot of trees.
Lots of them.
Not only that, Wendi never mentioned calling her boys' school to make sure that they were okay.
Right. And I said to you, even if I even saw like a cop car or an ambulance on our street, I would immediately call him.
You have.
I have. And I've said, oh my gosh, is everything okay? There's something happening on our street. But there was no call that Wendi mentioned to Dan or to anyone about a literal crime scene on their tiny 1-mile road in the middle of broad daylight, having a clear view. Make it make sense, because it doesn't to me. Right. She was talking to her friend on the phone. But if all this wasn't enough to convince someone that Wendi had some knowledge of Dan's demise, let's just look at Trescott compared to Centerville Road. Because Wendi called this a shortcut, and she said she wasn't a big drinker. She didn't frequently buy liquor. She never bought bourbon. So to be fair, perhaps out of habit, because I've done this before, I've driven a familiar route, she went to a familiar area where she knew that she had seen an ABC Liquor near her old street, where she lived a lot longer than she had in her new home. Even if we give her the benefit of the doubt and pretend that iPhones don't have maps, Trescott is not a shortcut by any means. I drove it virtually on Google Maps for all of you. It's a turnoff you consciously have to make. It's got a number of speed humps, like I mentioned, to keep the speed at a minimum. It's completely residential with no businesses. In some places, it's 15 miles per hour. In others, only up to 25, whereas Centerville has a posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour. That's 10 miles faster, no speed humps, and it's more of a through street than a residential neighborhood road. And it's the way that Google Maps will specifically make you go if you map it. We want to leave you with all that to think about going forward with everything you're going to hear next.
Now that they had her timeline down, Isom wanted to know if Wendi knew anyone who would want to hurt Dan. We've gathered clips from her interview related to this question, and it's quite a loaded one.
It is indeed.
Do you know anybody that would have a beef against your ex-husband?
He's, oh God.
I hate to ask it now, but I have to do it now. You understand, right?
I understand. He had friends. He always meant well, but he would sometimes rub people the wrong way.
Okay.
But not anyone who would do something like this.
No one that you know of or that you've spoken to recently that he's had some type of problem with or that he was concerned about?
No one that he was concerned about. I mean, we've been separated for 2 years, so I don't know, like,
right.
If he had something going on, I wouldn't know about it, but I know a lot of people didn't love him, but not anyone who would, like, hate him.
Okay.
He meant well, everyone that knew him.
Okay.
Knows that he means well, but he can be a little, like, argumentative.
Right.
But not, he didn't owe anyone money. He didn't do anything except work and take care of his kids. He wasn't involved in anything bad.
Okay.
I can't believe this is happening. He has a girlfriend now.
Do you know his girlfriend?
I met her once in the last couple of weeks. She was visiting. She lives in New York.
Okay. Do you know anything about her?
I know some things about her. She's also a law professor. I know she's recently divorced and she has a son. I don't know if her divorce is final, but I think recently divorced. I don't know what Amy's full divorce situation is like. So if you're going to think of someone who's not thrilled with Danny, I don't know how happy her husband or ex-husband is with the situation.
Do you know anything about him?
I don't know anything about him.
Okay, so far she's relayed that Dan can rub people the wrong way. But he means well. He's not involved in anything nefarious. He just works and takes care of the boys. But he does have a new girlfriend named Amy Adler. And she's recently divorced, so maybe her ex has an issue with Dan?
Right, maybe the jealous ex.
Then she sat and thought for a minute before admitting that she has a lot of friends that knew Dan didn't treat her very well. And she was scared that maybe someone did this to him because they thought it would be good for Wendi somehow.
How would that be good for Wendi somehow?
Doesn't make sense to me.
But now we are getting somewhere, aren't we?
Danny didn't treat me very well. And I'm so scared that maybe someone did this. Not because they hate Danny, but because they thought this was good somehow.
Oh, are you saying that you think maybe one of your friends would have done something like this?
Who would do this?
I don't know. That's why you're here, and that's why we're talking.
Wendi was blatantly asked if she ever asked someone to kill Dan for her, and she responded not in a million years, and also firmly said no when Isom asked if she thought someone would do this for her benefit.
Would you ever ask someone to do something like this?
Not in a million years.
Okay. Do you think someone would do this for your benefit without asking you?
No.
What good does it serve? I mean, unless you have something I can't think of, I'm looking for some reason that someone would want to hurt him.
Not just hurt him.
Right.
I mean,
I know, but the intention.
I could see one of my friends wanting to shake him.
Right.
But like, God.
Right.
No. I don't know who would do this. And I'm very scared because I don't understand why this would happen. He and I got along fine for the sake of the kids. You heard the message where he was like, well, maybe we'll just take a walk around school. And
right.
I mean, I found him hard to be around, but so did a lot of people. They all knew he meant well. He was a decent, good human being. He wouldn't hurt anybody. He would never do this to anybody. I don't know who would want to hurt him like this.
She did say she thought maybe one of her friends would shake him up, but not with a gun, adding that even her family, who felt like she was mistreated, would never do something like this. Wendi even stated that even though her parents disliked Dan, they would never say anything bad about him to the kids.
But even my family, who felt like I had been mistreated, would never do something like this. Never. You know, my parents are, very angry towards him. But even when they're around my kids, they would never say a bad word about my kid's father. They're really, really careful about that. They just like him, but they know he's the father of my kids. They would never do that.
Right.
I don't know who would be angry enough with him.
Well, that's what I have to find out.
To do something like this.
And it's interesting that she would specifically mention that, because in part 1, we talked about how one of the last motions that Dan filed that really enraged Wendi's mother, Donna, and seemed to be the nail in Dan's coffin was one Dan had actually just recently filed in an attempt to prohibit Donna from being with the kids unsupervised. This was on account of a breach of his and Wendi's marital settlement, which specifically stated that neither parent should disparage the other in front of the children. Not only had the boys come to Dan themselves and told him that Donna hated him and said that he was trying to take her sunshines away, but Dan had heard Donna refer to him as stupid when he called to Skype with the boys while they were down in South Florida visiting with Wendi. That motion was yet to be heard, and it probably wouldn't be now that Dan appeared to be in grave condition.
With all this talk about how badly Dan supposedly treated Wendi, I dug deeper, asking if he'd been abusive. Wendi explained that he wasn't physically but emotionally, and that he was very litigious. He liked to fight in court. Wendi explained that they settled their divorce a year prior in the summer of 2013, but Dan disagreed on how much was owed to Wendi.
Well, you guys have been divorced for over a year. Has there been any type of abuse in that time?
Of him towards me?
Yeah.
No. It's, he's litigious, and we have an ongoing case because the house, it shouldn't be in my name anymore, but when we settled the case of our divorce, he said, one of the agreements the court said was Danny wanted to stay in the house. They said, you can have the house, but you need to pay her half of the amount of what the house is worth. And he agreed to it, and then months passed and he just never paid me. Okay. And so we have ongoing litigation.
She even mentioned she was the only one she knew of that Dan owed money to. But in the same breath, she made sure to say she wouldn't do this to him.
Anybody that he owes money to?
No, he owes money to me.
He owes money to you?
But not me.
Okay, all right.
Oh my God, we're kids.
She further explains that Dan even had upset her attorney, Kristen Adamson, because he filed a motion that challenged both Wendi and Kristen's good faith when they listed all of the marital and non-marital assets.
Dan claimed that Wendi and her attorney fraudulently filed that paperwork and diligently left out $500,000 worth of what he considered marital funds that he was entitled to. But Wendi and her attorney claimed that that was an inheritance from before they were married, and therefore it didn't count. And Dan had apparently threatened to get both of them disbarred. But Wendi said she and her lawyer were very prudent when it came to the law, and they'd go about fighting Dan legally, not hurting him physically. They were planning to have that hearing on July 24th, all about this, especially since their last judge, Judge Hobbs, said that she was going to hold Dan in contempt if he didn't pay the money that he owed Wendi. But Dan replied by saying that he was going to file that motion instead. What happened was that Kristen had to withdraw as Wendi's attorney because now she had to be a witness in the case.
And he had until mid-October to do it, and he just didn't do it. And so I asked him, where's the money? Like, what happened? And he said, I have compelling reasons and I'm not paying it. And I said, well, what are the reasons? And he said, I'm not telling you. So I rehired my attorney and we filed a motion in court to have him pay me what he said he would. When we had our hearing with the judge about whether Danny needed to pay me, the judge was like, you need to pay her the money. Like, we're going to hold you in contempt of
Which
court.
judge is it now? I know they just changed all the judges.
They
over
do.
there.
So it was Judge Hobbs.
Before? Okay.
So, like, Judge Hobbs at that hearing. And she was like, I'm going to put you in jail. Like, pay her the money.
Right.
And he was like, well, Your Honor, I have, I'm going to file a motion for full custody of the kids, and I'm going to file a motion for, he never did that, but like a motion for sanctions against Wendy's attorney, who's Kristen Adelson, because he thought that she did something wrong, which she didn't. But so, I mean, she withdrew from the case and was going to serve as a witness. So she's not going to lash out at him for it. She's using the legal process to do it. Because he filed sanctions against my attorney, Kristen was like, I can't represent you anymore. I need to represent myself. Like, I need to be a witness in your case because he's impugning my professional reputation. So Kristen hooked me up with Jimmy to be my attorney instead.
So Wendi had to get a new attorney, and his name was Jimmy. And we just want to say, this is a tactic. We already know both of them have tried to get attorneys off of cases and have a conflict so that they don't have attorneys. And then if you don't have an attorney, you have to settle somehow, right? So it's just a big game.
Wendi had asked a number of times if she was a suspect.
Do I need to be read my Miranda rights or something if you're going to look at my phone?
I can read you Miranda if you want to hear that.
I don't know. I'm just trying to make sure I'm being
I have no reason at this point to suspect you in this incident. Okay?
I couldn't tell from the way you were talking to me in the car if I was a suspect.
Well, no, the reason was I didn't want to get into everything until we got up here.
And I get why I would be a suspect, but the idea that we were divorced, the idea that I would ever do anything is like, I understand why they need to check, but I don't know who would though. I don't know who would do this. I can see why they would think it would be me. I understand why I'm a suspect. I guess I'm not a suspect. I understand why you would think that I would do this, but not you. But
right.
That's why I was trying to show the officer, like, I have receipts from all these things, but I don't know if it matters if they're at noon. I mean, obviously, like, I would be one of the people that they would think did it.
Well, you have certainly the most contentious relationship with Danny that anyone has.
Yeah. They swabbed my hands.
Well, fair enough.
Gunpowder.
They should.
I understand why they think it would be me. But
of course it would be you.
So they thought we were still married, and so I was telling him everything, and then I was thinking, oh my God, now they probably think I'm a suspect. I should.
But of course you're a suspect, and you're a smart suspect. You should be the suspect. But you're not gonna get framed for a crime,
right? I'm gonna go to the bathroom and come back. Do you need to am I a suspect? You need to watch me.
No, I don't need to watch you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just keep feeling like I'm a suspect and I need to ask.
No.
Even stating that when Dan's parents find out, they're going to think she did this because she never got along with them. They were difficult people, according to her.
Right. Who would think that? When they find out, they're going to think I did this.
Why would you think that?
But we always have to think about the fact that statistically speaking,
it's the spouse.
Partners are the first person everyone looks at.
His family's all in Canada.
Okay.
They're going to think I did it.
No, now, just don't jump to conclusions on that.
Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. The reason why I say his parents are going to say I did it is because after we got divorced, I wanted to move to South Florida, and I filed a petition to relocate in the court, and the court said no. So
because of the kids.
Yeah. So you can always leave, you just can't leave with your kids. So, we're in Tallahassee because of Danny's job.
Detective Isom assured Wendi he didn't think she was a suspect, but he had to work just as hard to rule her out. That is why he was asking so many questions and playing the good cop role. He tells Wendi that if she had something to do with this, that she's being so straightforward, he would think that she would have told him by now.
That's such a tactic.
Right.
So just listen to it.
I understand why you think I'm the primary suspect.
No, you're not the primary suspect. I have to work just as hard whether you were or you're not.
Okay. I understand.
To show what your activities were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's put it this way. I think you're a straightforward person. And I think at this point, if you had anything to do with this, you'd have already told me.
Okay.
And you haven't. So my thing is that let's let the...
My ex-husband caused me a lot of grief. I would never do something like that.
I know.
So if Wendi wasn't a suspect, were there any alternative theories about who could have done this? That's what Wendi is trying to figure out. She already briefly mentioned it could be Dan's new girlfriend Amy's ex-husband. Well, here are some other alternative theories. I'm not sure why, but one of Wendi's friends, Jane McPherson, was brought into the interview room. I believe this was because at the time, they were all trying to coordinate who would pick up Wendi's kids at preschool now that Dan was lying in a hospital bed on life support in the ICU. Ultimately, a friend named Lynn and her husband went to get them, but apparently the investigators had already called Jane. So they allowed her to come in that moment and speak with Wendi to relay that the kids went with Lynn. Well, while she's in there, with only Wendi and the victim advocate Sarah Latour, Wendi asked Jane, who could have done this? And that's when Jane brought up Jeffrey Lacasse as someone who may want to harm Dan. Jeff was Wendi's most current boyfriend. Jane had actually introduced the two of them because they were mutual friends. Jane was completing her PhD in social work, and Jeff was a professor of social work. Here's that interaction now.
Jane, who would have done this?
I have just
and
one
are they
idea.
going to come after my kids? Or me? Who's next?
Is Jeff this much of a lunatic?
I didn't even think of Jeff. I hope to God not.
Let me ask who Jeff is.
Yeah, of course.
I think you should. I think Wendi's been seeing a guy called Jeff.
Who's a friend of Jane's. And
who's jealous.
Yeah. We've been dating for like 9 months, so like 10 months a year.
And when you use the word dating to you, is that's my boyfriend, or is it more of just dating, like the casual? Okay.
Yeah. No, like he was my boyfriend and involved with the kids, and I mean, yeah. And we had kind of a fight recently, and he's been trying to get back together, and I didn't know if I wanted to, and so he actually, the morning that I gave that talk, my boys were there and Jeff was watching them, so I could give the talk. Like he's, Jane, do you think I have to tell them about him?
I think you have to tell them about him, because that is the only,
God forbid.
The only thing that I can imagine related to you, related to Danny, would be
the only
Jeff.
thing I could come up with was like his girlfriend Amy is recently divorced, separated, not really divorced.
Sure. So either of those people,
like the jealous boyfriend types, like what if the ex-husband?
Right, totally. And you know that this divorce has been very stressful, and Jeff has been very stressed out by the stressfulness of your divorce.
I mean, what am I? I mean, I'll tell them this, right? Like, can you tell?
Mm-hmm. And when Investigator Isom comes back, you guys can just say, and he'll ask all the questions that investigators ask that I don't think of very often because I'm a victim advocate. I don't think of it.
But I think you do have to tell about him.
Yeah, I wasn't.
You weren't
not telling on purpose.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I wasn't thinking of it.
He's a professor of social work.
Okay.
He's
right.
former military. Relationally, he's jealous.
Right. Are you still currently seeing him, or just something you kind of let taper off?
It's been a bad week.
Okay.
Yeah, Jane and I actually went for a walk together Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Earlier this week.
But you've taken a 1 week break from
I took
Jeff.
a 1 week break from communication with Jeff to figure out what to do.
Okay.
We wanted to make it clear that it was Jane who brought up Jeff Lacasse and not Wendi, because there have been publications, YouTube videos, and comments that incorrectly state that Wendi brought up Jeff, and she didn't. When both Wendi and Isom leave the room, Jane even gets on the phone with someone, and she said she suggested Jeff.
Wendi, of course, they've been interviewing her as a suspect, and I have suggested Jeff Lacasse. That's my contribution.
And then when Detective Isom comes back, Jane even brings Jeff up to Isom herself.
I appreciate you coming up here.
I'll get out of your way.
It's time to go.
Okay.
We got some more stuff we have to take care of. But I really appreciate you coming up here and talking to her. And I suggested to you that you look at Jeff Lacoste.
That's what Sarah was saying. I'm not sure who that guy is. Well,
but
she'll tell you about it. And
is she going to tell me everything?
I imagine she will. I mean, she's been Danny's a jealous guy. Jeff is a jealous guy.
All right.
That as a social worker, I would be.
Well, let me ask you this: if Jeff is the new guy, why would he do it?
Just because he's. Because this is something I wouldn't say in front of Wendy.
Okay.
I thought you said it's something I wouldn't say. I'm right here.
But, doing the kind of work I do, I would think, there's this person, and then he loves Wendy. Danny makes Wendy's life very difficult. Wendy is currently making his life very difficult. I don't know him to be a lunatic, but he's a jealous guy.
Okay. All right.
That's what I would say. He's my colleague, so he's somebody I think of as a decent guy.
That would be who now?
Jeff Lacoste is my colleague.
Okay.
After Jane leaves, Detective Isom wants to know everything about Jeff Lacoste. We're going to let Wendy explain this, but after her divorce from Dan, she didn't want to rush into anything. But by the fall, she was seeing a few guys here and there, and eventually she narrowed it down to Jeff Lacoste and a guy named Daniel Sack. We're going to call him Daniel, not to confuse him with Dan, who Wendy refers to as Danny in the interview. Daniel was moving away, so ultimately Wendy picked Jeff to get more serious with, and since about September of 2013, almost a year, she and Jeff had been boyfriend and girlfriend.
I didn't know earlier, but apparently you got a guy in your life named Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about Jeff.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to hide anything.
No, I know you weren't.
I just didn't think to tell you about him. So he's been my boyfriend. We've been dating since end of October. Jane actually set us up, which is why Jane thought of him first.
Okay, how long have you been seeing Jeff?
Since the end of September.
Okay, all right. And so since September, you all have been seeing each other exclusively?
In the fall, I was dating someone else too, and the relationship really evolved around February. I post-divorce, I was kind of slow to but so I jokingly used to call him my special man friend, and around February, he started being more like my boyfriend. He started spending some time with the kids, and they really adore him. And I introduced him as mommy's friend, not as mommy's boyfriend, so they just think of him as Jeffrey, and he plays Star Wars with them. And so he and I would spend time together on the nights or the days I didn't have the boys. And then when I had the boys, he never stayed over, but he would sometimes join us for dinner and play with the kids and then go home.
Detective Isom wants to understand why Jane and Wendy would think Jeff would harm Dan. So Wendy explains that they've currently been on a week-long break because she needed her space after she was unhappy with his behavior. Back in May, he found out that Wendy had been in contact with that guy Daniel that she'd been seeing in the beginning of their relationship, and he confronted her about it after going through her phone and seeing a text exchange between them. She explained he was just a friend, but then she went to get coffee with Daniel without telling Jeff, and he just happened to show up and see her with him.
I mean, I'd been dating someone else in the fall, and so he had asked me, did you see someone else in the fall? Kind of once things were good with us, maybe around April, and I said I did, and I told him about it, and he felt like, I don't know, he was jealous of him, and he was like, I don't want you to see him.
The guy that you were seeing in the fall that Jeff got jealous of.
His name's Daniel.
Daniel?
Mm-hmm.
Daniel what?
Sack.
Sack?
S-A-C-K. He's moved, so he and I actually went to college together. So we knew each other in college and then lost track for 12 years, and then he ended up getting hired by the theater department here.
But since left?
In May, at the end of May, he moved to Amherst to start a job there.
And you saw him briefly at the same time you were seeing Jeff?
In the fall, yeah. I had actually never dated two people at once before, but I wasn't exclusive with either one. And
right.
So I dated them both until until I realized Daniel just was gonna leave, and I thought Jeff had potential. So, and the guy I was dating was leaving town. And so I said, well, I want to, go get coffee with him before I leave town. And he said, I really, I don't want you to do that. And we had an argument about it, and I went and had coffee with him anyway, and he ended up at the same coffee shop at the same time and saw us having coffee and got really angry. But
when was that?
That was May. Like mid to late May, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. And the detective was like, do you think that Jeff showed up on purpose? But Wendi was like, no. And I was thinking, yeah, because he also apparently saw a calendar event, not just a text, but like the day she was going to get coffee, I think. We're going to confirm that later. But nevertheless, he saw them together.
Well, do you think it was a coincidence, or do you think he intentionally went to
I think it was a total coincidence.
Okay.
And most recently, within the last month or so, Jeff had become convinced that Wendi had been cheating on him. So things changed in their relationship. On June 28th, they took a short trip to Gainesville where Jeff was teaching a class at the University of Florida. And while they were at dinner, Jeff confronted Wendi, saying that he thought that she'd been cheating for months. So after this, Wendi wasn't sure she wanted to be with him if he didn't trust her. She said she cried the entire drive home.
And things actually were great, and I was very happy. And then we went to Gainesville together. He's a social work professor at FSU, and he was teaching a class at Gainesville. And so I didn't have the boys that weekend. I went with him to work on some writing, and we had a great weekend until Saturday night. We went out to dinner. We came home, and he just was convinced that I'd been cheating on him for months, and had kept track of it, and was just absolutely convinced that I was cheating on him. And I kept telling him I wasn't, and he just was, I felt not very trusting of me, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable. And after that happened, I wasn't sure that I wanted to be with him anymore.
And that's when Jeff wanted to look at your phone or something?
Yeah, did Jane tell you that?
Yeah.
So he had said that he wouldn't, it wasn't that time, but he had said, if Jeff would be over and I was doing something, I would leave my phone out. I have this old agenda book. I'd leave that out. And basically he said that he saw that I had called Daniel, and he saw it in
Daniel
my phone.
Stack?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry, that's why I said there's Danny and then there's Daniel.
Gotcha.
So it had really upset me that he had gone through my phone, and that he had, I was just, the whole time I was just kind of crying. I was just really sad. I felt like we had a great relationship, and his behavior made me think that I couldn't really be with someone like that. And I didn't really say much other than I was just really no, I didn't cheat on you. Yes, I saw Daniel in the fall. No, I haven't seen him more than as a friend since February. And if you don't trust me, we can't really do this. So
This was on the 28th of June in Gainesville.
Yeah, so we drove back that Sunday morning, and I cried the whole way.
Then things got worse just days later when she took a 2-week trip down to South Florida, starting on June 30th to celebrate her father Harvey's 70th birthday. She was very busy with the kids and her family, so she didn't want to talk to Jeff as much. When she got back, Wendi said she felt like they needed to take a break. His behavior made her think she couldn't be with somebody like that. She said he was sad and apologetic, telling her, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm going to lose you."
My parents don't believe that I can drive the boys down to South Florida by myself, so they like to drive up and help me drive down with them. So my folks were coming up that Sunday. So Jeff left. I had a couple of hours. My parents came up, and then Monday morning I went and picked up the kids, and then I went away for 2 weeks and just got back. And I asked him to just no contact for a week, just so I could kind of figure out whether I wanted to be with him or not. And then he was, really sad and apologetic, and was like, "Oh my God, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm going to lose you." And
Wendi explained that just last week on Sunday, July 13th, she and Jeff went to dinner and a movie, and she had mixed feelings because it was nice to see him, but she still wasn't sure about the way that he was acting. The next day on Monday, the 14th, they went to yoga together, and Jeff acted like he wanted to hang out for the rest of the week like normal. But after giving it some thought and consulting with friends, including having a long walk and talk with Jane, Wendi decided to email Jeff and ask for a week of no contact so that she could evaluate her feelings. This happened to be the same week that Dan was shot. Jeff had respected her wishes and didn't email her back, but apparently he dropped off some things for the boys on Tuesday. Other than that, there had been no calls, no texts, nothing.
And Jane and I had a long talk earlier this week. We went on a walk together and talked about, I wasn't really sure I wanted to continue dating him. I asked him to just no contact for a week just so I could kind of figure out whether I wanted to be with him or not.
When did you ask him that?
Monday night after yoga. I sent him an email Monday night.
So Monday night after yoga.
I sent him
this past Monday.
This Monday,
Okay.
yes, July 14th.
Okay.
I just sent him an email and said, you know, my heart is really heavy and I'm having trouble figuring out what to do. It'd be a lot easier if I just like didn't have any contact from you for 1 week, and then we'll kind of figure out where to go from there. And so I haven't had any contact from him.
Was he amicable to that, or did he?
He didn't respond to it. I said, I'm going to take your silence as acceptance. And
Oh, okay. You were in person telling.
no, I emailed him after yoga. He'd been like, let's go out tomorrow, let's go out the next day. And I felt I have a hard time saying no. And
Right.
so I didn't say no in person. And then later I wrote him and said, I really just need like a week of silence to get some clarity on where we are.
Okay. So he never responded. Still has not responded.
The only response I had is that I bought some presents for Ben for his birthday when Jeff and I went to Destin one time and he had them at his house. And so he brought them. I came to work and there was a bag of the presents from his house. But I had asked him at yoga, I said, oh, when you get a chance, I'm really going to need you to bring those presents because I don't have the boys this week and I could wrap them. And so he just brought the presents so I could wrap them.
When did he bring them?
It must have been Tuesday morning at some point.
Isom asked Wendi if Jeff was violent, and she said no, not at all. Isom asked if he had a gun, and she said no, but he was in the military, so he could have a gun.
Is Jeff a violent person?
No.
Not at all.
No.
Jeff own a gun?
I don't think so. I mean, my guess would be like 100% no, but I guess I was only in his house one time. I mean, he certainly could have a gun and I wouldn't know about it, but he never
Lives by himself.
Lives by himself. He'd never talked to me about a gun.
Okay.
I mean, he was in the military, so.
Wendi explained Jeff's jealousy a little more. She clarified it was toward Daniel and not Dan Markel. Jeff would talk her through hard, contentious divorce things when she was upset, and he was more sad for her than angry.
Did he ever show any jealousy or any anger towards Danny, or was it all Daniel?
He was jealous of Daniel. He was not jealous of Danny. He spent a lot of time talking to me. So, you know, I mean, he's a therapist, so he would sit and let me talk for long periods of time about how sad I was about certain things or how upset I was about certain things. And he would just listen and say, I'm so sorry you're going through this, and then offer alternatives. But he was never like, I'm so pissed, or, you know, he wasn't.
He never showed emotion towards any of this?
I mean, in the sense of like, I'm so sorry for you, like this sounds really hard, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. He would hold me, you know, that kind of stuff, but not like, I'm so angry.
Did he ever meet Danny?
Yeah, he met him a few times. Sometimes Danny would be late to pick up the kids and there'd be like an overlap where Jeff would come, and so he had met him. There was like the boys sang at the Capitol one time, and Danny was there and Jeff was there, and Danny seemed, I mean, I'm sure it's not fun to see your ex-wife with someone new, but Danny seemed, he was very pleasant and very fine about it. He was really appropriate, and Jeff was like, you know, they'd say, hey, you know, they wouldn't really like make a lot of small talk, but fine.
Had Jeff ever been to your former house on Trescott?
No.
Would he have any reason to go there?
No.
Does he know where?
I think he would know where it is because I would sometimes take Trescott and sometimes not, kind of depending. Like if I knew the kids were there and I thought I might have the chance of like running into them, then I didn't take Trescott. If it was like nighttime and we were driving back from somewhere, sometimes I would take Trescott and I would be like, there's my former home. You know, like it's, you know, I would point it out.
With him in the car?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember like a specific instance in which I did that, but I'm sure that would be something I'd say like, wow, that was my house. Like, isn't it pretty? Or, you know.
So you never took him there specifically to pick up the kids or
no.
exchange anything or anything along those lines?
No.
What was the most recent time from now, the most recent past time that you had this discussion about the trials and tribulations of your ex-husband and so forth with Jeff?
It was all the time.
All the time. Okay.
There were always things, like when he first started dating Amy, he would Skype from bed with Amy, and so I would talk to him about that, of like, I don't think this is that appropriate, like he's Skyping, from bed, you and I would never do that. But I think that was more like a month ago.
I just wondered if there was anything recently that kind of
There was nothing
sparked.
like a huge thing of like, oh, I can't believe he did X, Y, or Z. And in fact, Jeff, like we were trying to figure out the school decision this week, but that happened, I got the call like on Tuesday or Wednesday, so Jeff didn't even know about that.
Another alternative theory was that maybe one of Dan's students was upset enough to hurt him. Jane, Wendi, and Sarah briefly discussed this.
Yeah, no, I think Jeff is somebody that they should talk to. And I don't know of anyone else.
They were asking, like, does he have gambling debt? Does he have, and I'm like, the only person he owes money to is me. Like, there's no one that he's like, he's a straight shooter, right? Like, he's not an alcoholic. He's not a gambler. He doesn't have a sex addiction. He doesn't, he doesn't have any, like, weird stuff going on in his life.
No, he's a difficult guy, but he's not a...
That's what he was saying. He's like, is there anyone that hates him? And I'm like, he's difficult, but he's difficult in, like, an ivory tower kind of way.
He's not liked, but he's not...
He's not liked, but he's not hated.
Certainly not, and he has people who love him.
How do his students feel? Like, is he, like, are law students receptive to him? Like, oh, this is a great...
I think there's some that really like his method, and there are a lot who don't like him at all.
So you say he's more disliked?
He's a very abrasive guy.
Does he challenge you, kind of? Would that be a good...
He's challenging. He loves to argue, so he's fairly elitist. So, like, the students...
Very elitist. Oh, my
students
goodness.
felt, like, put down by him a lot.
Okay.
And so they feel, like, insecure. But, again, we're not talking about, like, hateful and awful. We're talking about, like, difficult.
Right.
Right.
Right. And he has colleagues who really don't like him.
But not enough to...
But this is a different, right, it's a different, right.
They don't like him, they don't want to go to lunch with him. Right.
No, yeah, no.
He doesn't make friends easily, but it's not like he makes a ton of time.
And he has he has very close connections at the temple.
That's what I said.
I mean,
said he's got Jewish community and
he's important in the Jewish community, and he's loved, and he's
and they're
serious academic.
Was anyone thinking that it was really weird how they were just like carrying on laughing? Yeah. I know that everyone grieves differently, but I thought I would mention it. Now for the final alternative suspect, and actually, this was mentioned within the first 25 minutes of this interview. We just didn't play that part yet. Wendi was already suggesting that somebody may have done this on her behalf. We know a lot of you pay attention to detail, so if you recall in part 1, we told you to remember the joke that Wendy's brother Charlie made in Bad Taste, and he had a habit of repeating. Do you remember it?
Sure do.
Well, Wendi actually mentioned this to Detective Isom, so let's listen to that.
Do you think someone would do this for your benefit without asking you?
No. I mean, my brother, the one, his name is Charlie, the one I'm really close to, he makes a lot of jokes in Bad Taste, and it was a joke he made. He bought the TV for me this morning that got broken, and I was talking to him about whether it made sense to pay to fix it or whether I should get a new one, and it was always his joke that, like, he knew Danny treated me badly, and it was always his joke. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV. I mean, he would never. He's my big brother, and he's been taking care of me since I was little, but he would never. And I told that to the repair guy this morning.
Right. That's okay.
I said, he asked me how much it cost, and I said I didn't know because it was a gift, because my brother said it's cheaper than a hitman. It was my divorce present.
Okay.
Such a horrible thing to say. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Wow, so her brother, who is very close to her, who knows all the trouble that Dan Markel has been causing in his sister's life, makes this joke about looking into getting her a hitman to kill Dan as a divorce present to Wendi. But buying a TV was cheaper. We were just as appalled in our last video. How does anyone think that's funny? Where's the punchline? As they say, there's always truth behind every joke. So could Charlie be involved? Could he be this person who got this wild idea that killing Dan would somehow be a good thing for Wendi?
Well, of course, Detective Isom wants to know more about Charlie. Specifically what kind of car he drove, because remember Dan's neighbor, James, indicated a light color Prius that was seen leaving Dan's driveway after he was shot. Wendi tells Isom Charlie has like 5 different cars. According to Wendi, he's quite the character. He even drives an unmarked police car.
What'd you say his name was?
Charlie.
Charlie, and he's in Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me what kind of car he has.
He has like 5 cars.
Can't tell me all of them.
He drives I think one of them is an unmarked police car.
Oh, really?
He's a bit of a character.
Okay.
So I don't know what he's driving at the time.
Right.
That's interesting that he drives an unmarked police car. Like, why would you need that?
She goes on to explain that Charlie lives in South Florida and does well for himself as a periodontist and works a lot in case Isom wants to know where he spends his time.
He's a periodontist, and he has this practice where he works from early in the morning till late at night. So if you ever wanted to find his whereabouts, he's working all day long and until early in the morning till late at night, always driving to a different office working.
Oh, he goes to different offices?
Yeah, he works in different offices all over South Florida, does implants for people, and he works really hard all the time. He's a girlfriend, so he's pretty much accounted for all the
Charlie,
time.
is that his first name?
Charlie's his first name.
Not Charles?
I think Charles is his legal name. No one calls him that.
What's his last name?
Adelson.
What's his middle?
J-A-Y.
Same spelling. Adelson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my god.
What?
What? Oh my gosh.
What?
I can't believe this is happening.
Okay. All right.
Finally, after Detective Isom leaves later in the interview and returns, he has a very important question for Wendi.
Well, let me ask you. If you found out that this was someone that you personally know, would that change your mind about what should happen to that person?
About what should happen to that person?
For prosecution purposes.
No.
Is there any way that you would think
somebody tried to kill my ex-husband? They should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Regardless of who it is.
I mean, it would be different if I thought it were my brother, but I don't think it was my family. Anyone outside my immediate family, that's a tough one. Okay. But I don't think my immediate family did this. So if it's anybody else, yeah.
Okay.
Wow. So at first she's like, punish them to the fullest extent of the law. But then she hesitated, and then she even backtracked, and she literally was saying, it would be different if I thought it were my brother, but I don't think it was my family, but her brother.
Specifically.
It would be different. And again, Isom presses her, asking if she thought Charlie would be capable of doing something like this. Here's her answer.
Do you think that this guy Charlie would even be capable of doing something like this?
No.
Let's just talk.
He's the Joker.
Okay. All right.
By 6 p.m., word had gotten out the story was on the news. And of course, Wendi had her phone back and was still getting a lot of calls and texts, and she still hadn't called to let her parents know. Investigators let Wendi know they were still unable to notify Dan's parents. It's hard to get someone to locate them in person, but they're still trying. One investigator asked Wendi if Dan's parents were in good health because clearly they were about to get the most devastating news of their lives.
We've been working on it. We're trying to get the law enforcement to go. But
his mom is a large woman and has some ongoing health issues. Okay. I think they're both actually. I mean, they're turning 70 this year. So, oh my God, I can't.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Dan's parents were recently divorced. Phil was now in Aspen, Colorado. Wendi tries to help by looking to see if she had Dan's parents' numbers in her phone, or at least his sister Shelly's number. But apparently, she deleted the numbers, saying that she went through her phone recently to delete numbers she wasn't using anymore. Interesting.
Yeah, that was really interesting that she would delete her kids' family members' numbers.
Right. But she did have Phil's number. She didn't have Ruth's. So she gave Detective Isom Phil's number.
You don't have a number for his sister, do you?
Let me see. I might actually. I've recently gone through my phone and deleted stuff I wasn't using, but let me see if I have Shelly. I don't have Shelly.
And it's Shelly Markel?
Markel.
Markel.
I think I have Phil.
Okay.
I do. I have Phil's.
Okay. Because we tried Ruth's number and she didn't answer.
So a lot of times they have a place up north that they go to on the weekends. I don't have that number, but Phil might answer on his cell phone. Mm-hmm. It's he does a lot of business, and so I think it's a toll-free number. Okay. Well, let me see if I have Ruth's. Okay. If I have the country house number. You guys are calling now, huh? Has there been any update from the hospital?
I haven't spoken with them.
If people wanted to
I did speak with ICU. I spoke with the nurse.
Is that the number you have for Ruth's house? His parents are recently divorced. Okay. I think she's at that number.
Okay. All right. Obviously, something we try to avoid as far as we like to have someone make contact in person, but we're just not having any luck right now because we don't have an address. We have business, because I was able to Google stuff and see the business stuff.
Yeah, but they're not going to be there.
Right. So this is what we're going to try and do.
At around 6:44 p.m., Wendi realizes that she was supposed to be at that Stock the Bar party that night at 6:30 p.m. So she asked the victim advocate if she should let the host know that she's not going to make it.
I want to send some text sort of canceling my plans. I'm actually at 6:30. I was supposed to be at a party by now, so let me tell Linda.
Said they're doing a Stock the Bar party.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that. Is that a thing?
I think it's newer for newer people getting married and don't have as much money to spend on weddings, so you do a Stock the Bar party, so at least you get all your liquor and... Or maybe just stock a bar at your house. I don't know. But that was my interpretation when I've heard of the Stock the Bar
I'll
parties.
be drinking that bourbon for dinner.
Do you like bourbon?
No.
I don't know much about bourbon.
I don't know anything about bourbon. I asked her Okay, so that was tonight's plan.
But here's my question. She's canceling after it started, yet she doesn't have a babysitter to call to cancel with, since I'm assuming the kids wouldn't have been allowed to come. So wouldn't that mean Wendi would have had to pre-plan a babysitter for that night? I didn't see her calling or texting anyone to cancel or mentioning like she had with various other people she brought up. What's even more interesting is that for a good couple hours, Wendi and the investigators were diligently trying to find someone to pick the boys up from preschool. If Wendi had really planned to make it to that party that night, wouldn't she have already had someone on hand who would have been meeting before 6:30 p.m. to watch Ben and Lincoln so she could go to the party?
I would think so.
If someone was already planning to watch the boys, Wendi would have certainly just said, I'll call the family member, the person who was originally going to watch them, and I'll tell them just pick them up a little sooner. It just makes you think.
Definitely makes me think.
Me too. It's like something doesn't add up there. It kind of makes you think like she never actually planned to make it to that party, because maybe something a little more pressing would be happening that night.
After this, Detective Isom told Wendi she could finally make that call to her parents. He stepped out to work on notifying Dan's parents, and Wendi prepared herself with the victim advocate. She seemed very nervous to make this phone call, so she dialed her mother Donna's phone at 7:08 p.m.
Okay. No, I think it's shock reaction. Right? Shock reaction?
Yeah. Oh, and I'm a shaker when I get upset. So, yeah.
I usually shake. I really don't. Okay, here it goes. This is the worst day of my life. Maybe I should text them if I can't reach them. Hi, Mom. How's it going? Mom, I need you to sit down. I am fine. The boys are fine. I need you to sit down. I'm fine, and the boys are fine. Danny has been. You can put me on speaker. Yeah. Danny has been shot. And I don't think he's gonna make it. And so I know. So I found this out around 1 or 2 today, and I'm at the police station, and I'm trying to help them figure out who may have done this. The boys are fine. I had Lynn and Alan pick them up from school, and they're with Lynn and Alan right now. And I'm gonna leave here soon and go be with them. But I really need you to come here and be with me. But I want you to either fly, obviously you can't leave right now, but I need you to get yourself together. If it's too much to drive, I'd really rather that you flew up. I'm at the police station, and I'm gonna leave soon and be with the boys before they go to bed. They're with Alan and Lynn, and they're totally fine. Yeah, the boys are fine, but they don't know anything yet. In his house, I know. I know. So I just need you to calm down before you get in the car, okay? Okay, so, and it's, it's evening, so if you want to come here tomorrow, I have a lot of people that'll, be here with me, and, we'll have a lot of support. So I want you to take your time and just be safe in getting here, but I'd like you to come when you can, okay? Yeah. Okay, all right. I love you. I think Jane might, I have the car here, but Jane might take me. I'm not going to be alone. So I have a lot of support, and I'll be fine. Yeah, if you could just come here, that would be great. He's in the ICU in the hospital. Okay, but be careful, okay? Okay. Okay. Okay, love you too. Bye. Mom. Oh.
You did awesome with that call. You were so stressed out about it, and you handled it.
Oh, and she was trying to say something right before Donna hung up, but she didn't have time to get it all out. Luckily, Donna heard it. She calls back, and here's what Wendi wanted to make sure to tell her mom. Or should I say, ask her mom.
He goes to the house.
Sorry, my mom might be calling back. She heard me. Mom? You did, yeah. I just wanted to ask if you could just tell Charlie for me. I just don't want to be making calls right now, so if you could just tell Charlie for me, that would be great. Okay, and just, it's on the news a little bit that there was a shooting on Trescott, and so I'm starting to get a lot of calls, and I'm not going to be answering them unless they're from you, so I would really try not to tell anybody what's going on just yet, just because, he's in the hospital, and Charlie, I talked to Charlie earlier today, obviously before any of this happened. I talked to him at 10 this morning, and he said that he was coming to visit you guys this weekend, and he had plans, and he sounded good. I just can't, Mom. So can you just tell him? Yeah, just tell him for me, and then I'm sure I'll talk to him soon. But I don't want to be on the phone unless I have to right now. Okay? Okay. All right. Love you too. Bye.
Wow. It was so important for Wendi to tell her mother to tell Charlie what happened to Dan for her. And part of me is Charlie is basically still attached to Donna's umbilical cord. It's as if she really would have needed to be reminded to relay everything to her favorite son. And right after she ends this call, Wendi turns to Sarah, the victim advocate, and says, quote, "My mom handled that pretty well. Could you hear her? Oh my God. Well, my parents sounded really surprised. So that's at least a relief." I was trying to think of who would be angry enough to do something to him. My parents would be angry, but they're not capable of this. Thank God. I really couldn't handle that right now. End quote.
My mom handled that pretty well. Could you hear her?
Yeah.
My parents have more reason to dislike Danny than almost anyone else. He hurt their daughter. But listening to my mom just like cry and be horrified on the phone and be like, oh, God, she sounded like...
Well, it's horrible. And normal, good-hearted people don't wish
nobody wishes
things like this to happen. You know, like you might say like, I get frustrated. You might be like, I hate someone, but you don't ever... Saying stuff out of emotion isn't something you really want sometimes to happen.
Well, my parents sounded really surprised, so it's at least a relief. I was trying to think of who would be angry enough to do something to him. My parents would be angry, but they're not capable of this. Thank God. I really couldn't handle that right now.
Yeah, no.
How could that be a relief?
Well, because her mom's reaction was unknown. Like she was calling out of the
Right,
blue.
she didn't know how she would react.
She could have been like, oh, I'm glad Dan's dead. We hate him. Or, who cares? Get rid of that old, whatever.
Right.
So she was relieved. And that's very telling
Exactly.
to me. It's like she's relieved that her mom didn't say something absurd.
Right.
It's like Wendi was like, oh my God.
I'm glad it seemed sympathetic.
Right, exactly.
In closing, here are a few things we thought were important to highlight from Wendi's interview. At the end of the interview, as Wendi is getting ready to be escorted back to her house to finally see her boys after such shocking news of this devastating event, Wendi is sitting with just Sarah as she waits for Isom to come back and get her, and Wendi says this.
I feel like either Amy's ex-husband did this or somebody did this on my behalf. Some crazy deranged person thought that this was a good way to support me. And that's why I feel responsible. I feel like by complaining about how difficult he was, like I inspired this lunacy.
We're going to end with some last words from Wendi.
I can't help but feeling like this is all my fault.
I can't help but feeling like this is all my fault.
That's quite an interesting statement. You probably guessed it. There's going to be a part 3. We've never even done a part 2, and now we're doing a part 3.
No kidding.
But we're way too invested in this case to end it here. And we've dug so deep into what happens next that we want to go into much more than the facts on the surface.
We promise you won't be disappointed, so please join us next week as we dive into the next chapter of this twisted plot to destroy Dan Markel.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe
And hit that notification bell.
so you don't miss our next episode.
Bye.
Bye.